We are now going to be having 12 shiurim on 12 perakim. These are the 12 perakim of the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and I think it's very important before Pesach to get to know these 12 perakim. Now, there's stories and there's medrash and there's teachings from the Gemara that has been gotten around. To know the full story from beginning to end, what the Torah says, what we can learn from the actual psukim, and what actually happened as the Torah says it, I think is very, very important, and that's the purpose of this share. So let's dig in. This is shiur 7. This is Perek Zion. Last Perek recapped a lot of what Moshe Rabbeinu and Hashem spoke about. And now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the story of the Geula. Before that, we start off with a pasuk that actually reiterates and recaps a previous pasuk and expounds on it. Before, we had a pasuk where Hashem said that Moshe Rabbeinu will be Elohim and Aaron will be the Navi. It sounded like, from just a plain reading of that pasuk, that Moshe will be an Elohim to Aaron, and then Aaron will be the Navi. When I explained that pasuk earlier, I told you that in context we read it, that really Hashem is referring back to Parai, that Moshe Rabbeinu will be a lord over Parai, like him could be a judge or a lord, doesn't have to be necessarily a god, it means any of those things. So Moshe Rabbeinu will be a lord over Paro, and Aaron will be the Navi. So Hashem says to Moshe, see, the Saticha, I am giving you Elikim LaParai, I'm making you a lord to Parai, but Aaron Achicha and Aaron your brother, Yenavichach, he will be the prophet, he will be the one who will be your advisor, what Hashem wants, but also someone who can give advice. And that was what Aaron was going to be for Moshe, an assistant. Ata Tidaber, you should speak, as Kol Asher Tzevecha. You will speak everything that I command you. But Aaron Nechicha, and Aaron your brother, Yidaber al Parai, will speak to Parai, B'shilach es B'nei Yisrael me'artzayim, and to send out B'nei Yisrael from his land. There's a little bit of recap of what was said previously, and now it's clarifying because now Hashem is going to send them back to Parai. Bani. Now, what is Hashem's adding over here? Akshe eslei Parai. I'm going to harden the heart of Parai. V'her basi, and so therefore I could make more. I could multiply or grandize as oisoisai, my signs, vesmoifsai, and my wonders be'eretz Mitzrayim, in the land of Mitzrayim. Notice how it says now be'eretz Mitzrayim, in the country of Mitzrayim. We're talking about the entire country, not just in Goshen. The Makos are, except for one, we'll see, went on the entire Eretz Mitzrayim, the entire country of Mitzrayim. Why didn't they just stick to Goshen like it seemed like they were going to when Hashem originally spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu back in Perek Gimel or Perek Daled? The answer is because Parai made a decree. And Parai's decree was that they have to get their own shra. And since they have to go to their own shra, what did we see Perek Hey? That was they have to get their own shra. They spread out throughout Eretz Mitzrayim. So since Bnei Yisrael had to leave their shchuna, they had to leave their neighborhood, their little Goshen, and go out to Eretz Mitzrayim, and now perceive the entire Mitzrayim and see what's going on in Mitzrayim. So now the entire Mitzrayim was going to be struck by this Makos. Also, it was no longer a local problem for the Melech Mitzrayim, but it was now Paro that was Melech Mitzrayim. Paro, who is the king of Goshen. There could be no question that he is controlling. He can't have an excuse. Oh, my underling is the one that did it, and I had nothing to do with it. Paro was obviously in control. So therefore, the entire Mitzrayim was now going to be struck by Makos. V'lo yishma aleichem Parai, and Parai will not listen to you. So Hashem's already telling this to Moshe Rabbeinu. V'nasati es yadi Mitzrayim, and I will place my hand on Mitzrayim. V'haitzesi, and I will take this as voisai, my legions, as Ami, and my nation, Bnei Yisrael, Eretz Mitzrayim. I will take you out from Eretz Mitzrayim, ubishvatim b'gdolim, with great judgments. The Yadu Mitzrayim, and not only that, Mitzrayim will also know Ki Ani Hashem, that I am Hashem. B'netoisi es yadi, when I stretch out my hand al Mitzrayim, on Mitzrayim, v'haitzesi, and I take as Bnei Yisrael mitoichem, from amongst them. It's going to be by force. Vayas Moshe v'Aaron, and Moshe Aaron did kasher tziva Hashem, exactly like Hashem said. Oisam kein asu. So they did. So why does it repeat? It says, in other words, they did the best of their ability to what they could understand. We're going to see in the following psukim that there was some deviation between what Hashem said and what they actually did. But the bottom line was they did what Hashem wanted them to do, and they accomplished the purpose. Moshe ben Shmonim Shana, and Moshe was 80 years. But Aaron ben Shloisha Shmonim Shana, and Aaron was 83 years. But Dvaram el Pare, when they spoke to Pare. So now we know the ages. Now Moshe Rabbeinu was 80, and we know that Moshe Rabbeinu left Mitzrayim sometime, and he settled in Midian sometime after he grew up. We don't know exactly what that was. So again, there's missing years of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. Obviously, we know that, but this gives us context. Vayem Hashem el Moshe ve'Aaron lemer. Now Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron saying, it's unclear whether this is a reiteration of the first time they went to Parai, and when Parai then said he did not know who Hashem was, and he made Bnei Yisrael then go get their own straw, or this is a second time they went before Parai, and this is something else. That it just makes sense contextually. This is the one and same conversation they had with Paro when he told at the end to get their own straw. There it talks about the conversation, and the reason why I talked about the conversation is because it reiterated what happened also with Melech Mitzrayim. They went to Melech Mitzrayim, and Melech Mitzrayim said, they're being lazy, and then they went to Paro, and Paro said the same thing. So the Torah skipped out the Isos. It elaborated further in Parak K and then through Parak Vav, like we learned all the conversations. So now this is once again elaborating on that first meeting. So Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron come to Paro after Moshe Rabbeinu returns from Midian and sending his wife back to Midian, and he got the final instructions from Hashem. He goes to Paro, and there at Paro, this is what happens. Ki yedaber aleichem Parai lemar, because you will speak to Parai and he will say to nu lechem moifes. You should have to give him a wonder, right? You don't come to a king of Egypt, the Pharaoh of Egypt, and you just say, oh, Hashem wants his people out. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense only Hashem wants the people out, and Paro says, I don't know Hashem, and Moshe Rabbeinu says, well, let me prove to you what Hashem is, and then Paro says, well, I'm unimpressed, and therefore the people should get their own straw. Marta el Aaron, and say to Aaron, Kaches matcha, take your staff, not my staff. Aaron, take Aaron's staff. V'hashlech lifnei Parai yehi l'sanin. Send it before Parai, and it will become a sea serpent. This is often translated as some sort of snake. However, contextually, throughout the rest of Tanakh, a tanin is not a snake. A tanin is definitely a sea serpent. It's something that lives in the sea. It's something that's large, that's scary. We don't know exactly what it was. Is it possibly a dragon? Possibly. So Moshe and Aaron came to Paro. And so they did. Just like Hashem commanded. There's no dialogue here. It makes no sense that Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron would go to Paro and then just throw down a staff and turn it into a sea serpent. It makes more sense. They came to Paro. Paro says, what do you want? Send out my people. We happened upon the God of the Ivrim, and he wants us to go celebrate him in the desert. Send them out for 3 days. Paro saying, I don't know who your God is. So Moshe Rabbeinu saying, look, and you'll see, Yishalach Aaron is Mateyu, and Aaron sent down his own staff, Lefnei Parai before Parai, Lefnei Avada before his courtesans, Vayhi Lasanin, and it became a sea serpent. Vayikra Gam Parai U Limit Chashvim. So it was called also before Parai his wise people and his necromancers, his Sugamheim Chartume Mitzrayim Bilahetim came. So too the necromancers were able to do the same thing before Parai. B'yishlchu ish Mateyu. Each of these people would send down their staff by Yulasanin, and they became also sea serpents. Vayivla mate Aaron is matoisam, but Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. So we have to understand what's going on here. Aaron sent down his staff; it turned into a sea serpent. They were called, these necromancers, magicians. They were called, and they also were able to produce sea serpents out of their staffs. Then what happened? Did the sea serpent that Aaron made swallow up the other sea serpents and then return to a staff? Or did it return to a staff, and then the staff itself ate up the other staffs? Unclear. From the reading of the pasuk, we would think the staff itself is what slaughtered the other staffs. However, it's a way that Torah talks, just to finish up the story. So the Torah is saying, by the way, Aaron's staff, which turned into a sea serpent, swallowed up the other sea serpents. So to make it a very lashon that's very protracted and concise, the Torah says the mat of Aaron swallowed their matas, very possibly while being a sea serpent. Or, if you want to say the greater miracle, when they turned back to staffs. Unclear. It never says they turned back to staffs. We can take it in context. The story can be read either way. Yes, like Parai, so Parai's strength is hard. Loi Shamaleim, that listened to him. Hashem di Hashem, exactly like Hashem said. So what follows from here was, not only that, did Parai not listen to them, but he made them go get their own straw. Moshe Rabbeinu had previously complained, how could Paro listen to me? The people can't even listen to me because they can't relate to me. Paro can't relate to me. I'm an utter failure. That's who we are. Hashem said to Moshe, Kaved le Parai. Paro's heart is very heavy, and he's refusing to send out the people. Moshe Rabbeinu knows that. He saw that. Because Hashem said, I'm going to strengthen Paro's heart. But Hashem didn't even do it. Hashem said, I didn't even do this one. This one is all Paro. Paro himself has a heavy heart. Paro himself has a grudge against you, a grudge against my people. Something is weighing his heart down. He's getting bad advice. Whatever it is, he's doing it all on his own. So therefore, we're going to have to now break Parai. But again, this is all planned for, and we're going to now do Isis and Meisim before Parai. And the Makkos are actually going to begin. Lecha Parai, go to Parai, Baboiker in the morning. Hine, behold, Yoitza Haimaima, when he comes out to the water, Vinitzavta Lekroisai al Sfas Hayar, and you will stand opposite him on the banks of the Nile River. So what's behold? Meaning Paro would come out early in the morning to bathe, to take care of his business, to bless the waters, whatever it was, and you are going to appear. Behold, Moshe and Aaron had an uninvited visit to this little ceremony that Paro was having in the morning by the Nile River. Bahamate es nepach lenochosh. Now the staff that changed over into a snake, tikach biyadecha, take in your hand. What staff is Hashem talking about? It's not the staff that Aaron threw down in front of Paro and turned into a sea serpent, because that was a sea serpent, not a snake. What are we talking about? Hashem told Moshe while he's talking to him by the sneh, by the burning bush on Har Sinai, throw down your staff, and it turned into a snake, the nachash. And Moshe Rabbeinu recoiled from it. So, and Hashem said, take that staff with you, and you'll do Isais. And the Torah says that Moshe Rabbeinu took the staff of Elikim to Mitzrayim with him. That is the staff he's talking about. Aaron's staff turned into a sea serpent. Moshe's staff does the rest of the Makkas. V'yamarta elov, and say to Parai, Hashem Elikei Ivrim, Hashem, the God of the Hebrews, Sholchani Elecha, send me to you, Lamer, saying, Shalach Asami, send out my people, Vayavduni, as they may serve me on Midbar, in the desert. V'hine, behold, Loi Shamata Ad Koi, behold, you have not listened until now. So, what's the surprise? The surprise was, when you have an emissary from a god saying, let them go serve the god, you should at least let them do it. And it made no sense, in the scheme of things, if the mitzrayim were still going to go under the impression that they pretended that Bnei Yisrael were still free people. It would make no sense for them to say not to go serve their god. As a matter of fact, the Egyptians had many gods, as we're going to come to find out in a few minutes. Hashem, so said Hashem, B'zais Teda, with this you should know, Ki ani Hashem, I'm Hashem. You asked, who is Hashem? I don't know him? With this you're going to know who Hashem is. Hine, behold, Anoichi Makeh, B'mate es biyadi. Behold, I'm going to strike with the staff that's in my hand, Al Hamoyim, on the waters, Asher B'ya'ar, that's in the Nile, V'nepchu, Lodam, and they will change over into blood. The Hadaga, and the fish, which means fish is not necessarily what scientists call fish only. It's all fish, all things that swim and live inside of the Ya'ar. Ya'ar, Tomos will die, Uba'ash, Haya'ar, and the Nile will stink. Usually it flows to give life supporting water to all the vegetation and also to drink, but now it's going to stink. The Nilu Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim is going to be completely repulsed by it. Lishtais Mayim in the air, for their ability to drink water from the Nile. They will have no benefit whatsoever from any water from the Nile. There's a little break, and there's further instruction given now after they speak to Paro that Moshe has to talk to Aaron. Moshe, Hashem says to Moshe, Emor Aaron, he goes to tell Aaron, Kach matcha udetei yodcha, take your staff and stretch out your hand. Your staff meaning Moshe's staff, and he's going to stretch out his hand al Meimei Mitzrayim, on the waters of Mitzrayim, al Naharisam, on the rivers, al Yairam, and on the streams, the al Agmehem, and the estuaries, the al Komik, the Udam, the Mehem, and all the places of bodies of water, the Udam, and they will be blood. And there will be blood in the all country of Mitzrayim, not just in the Nile, but the entire country of Mitzrayim will have all the water will be blood. Even in the wood and in the stone, because wood has water in it, moisture in it, because it used to be plants, it used to be a tree, so there's water in it, that will turn to blood. And rocks also, there is water that flows through rocks and stones that are natural. Any semblance of water will turn to blood. The Yas Cain, and similar to this, Moshe Aaron did. Kasher Tziva Hashem, similar to what Hashem commanded. By Yorem, B'mateh, he lifted up his staff. By Yachas Mayim, and Aaron struck the water. Al Biar, that was Asher Biar, that was in the Nile. Hashem didn't say strike the Nile. Hashem said lift it over. Aaron struck it. Le'eni Parai, in the eyes of Parai, Le'eni Avodav, in the eyes of his courtesans, the Heifchu Kol Hamayim Asher B'Yar, and all the water that was in the Yar, the Nile, Adam, turned to blood. Notice how Aaron did not do the next step. Aaron did not go from place to place, lifting his staff over every body of water. And the reason was because this makkah was that only the waters that Aaron lifted his staff over, Moshe's staff over, would turn into blood. Therefore, you have to go around Mitzrayim over all bodies of water, like the Pasuk said. However, what did Aaron do? Aaron simply did it by the Nile when they met Paro, and the Nile, we know, flows upriver. So eventually, when the Nile flowed throughout Eretz Mitzrayim and finished flowing, so then it automatically turned back to water. The Hadaga and the fish, Asher B'Yar, that was in the Nile, Mesa, they died, the Alei Shayar, and the Nile stunk, like Hashem predicted. Lo Yachlu Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim was not able to lishtais mayim in the earth to drink water from the Nile. By Hi Adam B'chol Eretz Mitzrayim, and there was blood in all Eretz Mitzrayim, because the Nile flowed straight through Eretz Mitzrayim, so all of Eretz Mitzrayim was able to experience that this Nile turned to blood. V'yasu kein chartumei Mitzrayim, but so could the magicians, the necromancers of Mitzrayim, v'letehem, with their magic, with their necromancing tricks. V'yechzak le Paroi v'lo yisham aleihem, so Paroi hardened his heart and he did not listen to them. Kasher dibar Hashem, like Hashem said. Vayifen Paroi, and Paroi even turned. Vayavel Beisa, and he went back to his palace. V'lo yisham liboy gamozais, he didn't turn his heart at all to this matter. Why? Because Paroi was not affected by this. He did not need the water from the Nile to drink. He had water in his palace, he had water in cisterns, so therefore he was not affected by this at all. And by the way, the question of course is, did the Makkah affect Goshen? So it seems, until the Torah says otherwise, the first few Makkahs definitely affected Goshen. There definitely was, whatever water flowed from the Nile northward and then flowed into Goshen, that turned to blood also. It didn't magically stop at Goshen. There's no source in Torah to say that it magically stopped at Goshen. However, how was anyone able to drink? So v'yachbaru kol mitzrayim sivais hayar, so they were able to dig trenches and wells on the side of the Nile, mayim l'shtais, for water to drink. Ki la yachul l'shtais, because they're going to drink meyar. It was specifically the meyar, the water of the Nile, they couldn't drink. But anything that was in a cistern, anything that was already stored, anything that was dug up new, fresh from underground, that they were able to drink. By Malay Shiva Yamim, and for full 7 days, Achrei Hakoitz Hashem Mesiyar. And it was like this for full 7 days. The Nile was blood, the waters were blood, they had to drink alternative waters. This Makkah lasted for 7 days, and it went away by itself after the 7 days. probably naturally, probably the course of the Nile River running its course throughout the land. Eventually, all the water turned back to water, and it was no longer blood. The reason why Bnei Yisrael tolerated it is because they either were warned beforehand, or they had other ways also of drinking water. The bottom line was, this was meant to make a sign and a moifes for Paroi and for the Trium. This one did not work out very well at all, because this one, Paro even ignored. He went back to his palace and didn't even pay it any mind. Then Hashem spoke to Moshe. Now we have another question. The question is, how long were the Makkos? So we'll talk about this more a little bit at the end, but if we calculate how long each Makkah was, and some we don't know how long they were. They could have been a day, they could have been overnight, and the time between the Makkos also is unclear. The Medrash says that the Makkos took 12 months. Or it was about 12 months for all the Makkos to take place. However, we're going to see later on in the Psukim that it makes no sense, because we have Makkos of Barod and Arba that strike at the new crops of spring, of early spring. It makes no sense that the 7th and 8th Makkah should take place in early spring, and only a year later in springtime did the Bnei Yisrael go out. So we'll talk about that when we get there. Hashem says to Moshe, Baya Parai, go to Parai, be a martyr love, and say to him, Kol Yamar Hashem, this is what Hashem says, Shalach es ami ve'evduni, send out my nation so they may serve me, the im ma'in atul shaleach, and if you refuse to send them out, Hine anoichi noigef es kol gvulcha bit svardim. I am going to strike your entire border with amphibians. Svardim is an unclear word. Some translate it as frogs, others as alligators. It makes sense both ways. Actually, there was an Egyptian god with a frog head called Heket, and there was an Egyptian god with a crocodile head called Sobek. So it is very possible that it was either frogs or crocodiles, or more likely they were both. Svardim probably means any type of amphibious type creature that lives both in and out of water. And according to the Torah doesn't have the same scientific classifications, so it doesn't differentiate between amphibian and lizard. So it probably was a mixture of lizards and amphibians. It probably was frogs and crocodiles together. That makes the most sense, because we see the next pasuk. Because the Ya'ar anyway was swarming with Svardim. So the Ya'ar, the Nile River, was swarming with what? With frogs and with crocodiles. So the Alu Baru base and they will go up and they will enter your house. Ubechadars and the rooms mishchavcha that you sleep in. The Almi Tosecha and also on your beds. Ubebase Avodecha and similar in the houses of your servants. Uba Amecha and your nation. Ubitanurecha and in your ovens, ubimish'aroisecha and also in your kneading bowls. So ubecha like this, ubamecha in your nation, ubechal avadecha, and all your servants yalu atzvardim, the tzvardim will go up and they will annoy. They're going to come out of the Nile River and they're going to really, really, really being annoying. So a couple of things here. First of all, it says Shem again asked Paro to send out the people. By the Dam, it did not say that. Instead, the Dam was a direct response to Paro saying, I don't know who Hashem was, and raising the burdens by keeping the quota of bricks, but also making the Bnei Yisrael of straw. So in response to that, Moshe Rabbeinu came and said, you don't know who Hashem is. You think you do whatever you want? I'm not even asking you to send the people out. Let me show you who Hashem is, and then we'll talk. And Paro ignored that. So then Moshe Rabbeinu came back to Paro and said, let Bnei Yisrael go out to serve Hashem. If not, there's going to be this mixture of amphibians and crocodiles. So I'd say call Gevulcha all your borders. Gevulcha means all the territories that make up your borders, all your territories really. So Mitzrayim was more than just its own borders. It was also its territories. It had territories probably outside of its borders properly, because probably for protection, forts and whatnot that extended south, definitely into the desert, probably to the west, at all its Gvulim, all its territories, and then it would include those. And that's actually where the swarm would come, and then it would go inward. It would come out and in. Just like later on, you can say the same thing, but a locust, they went from out to in, to all the territories of Mitzrayim, not just the country of Mitzrayim proper, but even those territories as well. And that was what the Torah was warning about. A couple final thoughts. It also said before, it said, Anoichi noigeves kol gvucha. Anoichi will make a plague in all the borders. Anoichi, again, we talked about this. Anoichi is Hashem. So Moshe Rabbeinu was saying that if you refuse to send out the people, Anoichi will make a plague. Not I will make a plague, not I, Moshe Rabbeinu, but Anoichi, Hashem, will make a plague. And the word noigev is a plague. People translate makos into plagues. Makos is not a plague. Makos are strikes. Makos is to strike at something, to hit something. It's a physical bang, an attack. That's what the makos were. They were really attacks on Eretz Mitzrayim, like a general attacking a country to free its people. And one final thought is that before it used the word vayach, when Aaron struck the Nile in order to turn it into blood, so it said vayach. That was the same term, actually, that Moshe Rabbeinu used when Moshe Rabbeinu struck at the mitzrayim. So again, just like Aaron didn't kill the water, he touched the water with the staff, and in that way he performed the makkah of dam. So too Moshe Rabbeinu didn't necessarily have to physically kill the mitzrayim. Like we explained earlier, it meant more like he did something to him, he struck out at him, and we learned by the context of the psukim, he actually ordered the death of the mitzri through the hands of others. This was Perek Zayin.